was meant to say that I'm very fortunate in the family I married into. Very, very fortunate. So, the speech at hand. How many people in this room have ever undergone a background check or got a security clearance? Okay, you're looking at a third of the room. Okay? Is it true those background checks are very rigorous? Yeah. They'll go through your family background. They might interview your youth pastor, your high school teacher. They will dig in. They'll look at your financial statements, criminal records, because they need to know you're a trustworthy person who will defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But what if you're a young Marxist radical like Cory Booker, who hangs around with the local Marxists and gets elected to the local mayoralty, then gets elected to the Congress or the Senate, where they may serve on the Homeland Security Committee, or the Armed Services Committee, or the Intelligence Committee? How much of a background check do those people need, folks? No. Zero. Nothing. You have to get a security clearance to be a defence contractor, but not to chair the Armed Services Committee in the House. Now, do you think maybe the Iranians have heard about this? And the Chinese? And the North Koreans? But surely they wouldn't use that against this country, would they? That would be unethical, would it not? People, we have a glaring hole. The most important legislators, the most powerful legislators on the planet have no background checks at all. None. So, but don't worry, don't panic, because we actually have a government agency designed to stop traitors or spies or terrorist sympathisers getting elected to the Congress or the Senate or doing any damage. And that's the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You feel better now? No. Are you relieved? Once you would have been. Once the FBI was a very professional, very patriotic organisation. Unfortunately, the leadership has betrayed those honest agents in the field. And we're in big trouble. Now, the FBI has another problem. They are answerable to the Judiciary Committee, the most powerful committee in the United States Congress. The Judiciary Committee oversees the Justice Department and the FBI. And how it's meant to work is the FBI catches the bad guys and the Justice Department prosecutes them. How's that been going in recent times? Not good. Not so good. They've both been weaponized against patriots, unfortunately. So, who remembers a congressman from Michigan, the man called John Conyers? He was in Congress from 1965 to 2017, which according to my Common Core math is about 140 years. Now, he was the most dangerous radical ever to serve in the US Congress at the time. He is the man who abolished your House Un-American Activities Committee, one of your last lines of internal defense. John Conyers was either the ranking member or the chairman of the Judiciary Committee for nearly 40 years. John Conyers had a 50-year history with the Communist Party USA. He was a card-carrying member of Democratic Socialists of America, a Marxist organisation, and he supported several Muslim Brotherhood front groups. And if you're not sure who the Muslim Brotherhood are, they were a semi-secret society that started in Egypt in 1929, and their goal was worldwide Islam. They worked with the Nazis during World War II. Then after the war, they worked with the Soviet KGB. They set up the Palestine Liberation Organization, Hamas, Al-Qaeda. But in America, including in this state, they worked legally through the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Muslim Student Association, etc. And when some of your Republican congressmen tried to get the Muslim Brotherhood designated as a terrorist organization, which they richly deserve, you can see right here in my movie, in his own words, John Conyers saying, no, no, the Muslim Brotherhood are a peaceful social service agency now. We should work with them, not against them. John Conyers was a hardcore anti-American Marxist-Leninist, working for Moscow through most of his career. Yet he gutted your internal security. He paved the way for what we're seeing now. So what about the Judiciary Committee now? Well, until recently, one of its members was Judy Chu from California, a long-time supporter of the Communist Workers' Party, militantly pro-Chinese. And you want to see Judy Chu, because every now and then the FBI looks like it's doing something and arrests one of the more than 25,000 Chinese spies currently working in this country. But Judy Chu, that's too much for Judy Chu. She gets on their case. You're a bunch of racists, she says. The FBI are racist for persecuting these poor Asian people. And she's arranged for sensitivity training for these cruel FBI agents so they don't persecute these poor Chinese spies any longer. Now, until the recent changeover in the House, do you know who the last head of the Judiciary Committee was? You've seen him on TV. He takes up the whole screen. That is Mr. Jerry Nadler of New York. The man who tried to impeach President Trump twice. Well, guess what? Jerry Nadler was also a card-carrying Marxist, a member of Democratic Socialists of America. What a coincidence. The last chairman, John Conyers, was a Marxist, and guess what? The guy who took over from him was also a Marxist, a member of the same little organisation that he was. This is about Lenin, the father of the Bolshevik Revolution. He famously said, "It is not the taking of power that is important, it is the keeping of power that's important." So if you find a communist or a Marxist taking over a position in a school board, a county commission, in Congress, and they retire or leave, you can almost guarantee the next person taken over will be cut from exactly the same cloth. And we see this in Congress all of the time. So here's an imaginary scenario. I'll give you another example. He's also in this movie. We got a man called Carson, Andre Carson, from Indiana, one of your 3 Muslim members of Congress. Now, back in 2012, he was at a Muslim Brotherhood Front convention in Connecticut, the Islamic Circle of North America, ICNA, which has direct ties to Pakistani jihadis. And he was up there and he said this, he said, "I've been told we have some spies in the audience today, some people here, some conservatives who are watching us because they believe we are here plotting to destroy this country. Well, I say to you people, I say to you infiltrators, Allah will not allow you to stop us." That man currently serves on the Intelligence Committee of the House of Representatives. You know, Kevin McCarthy's done a great thing. He pushed off Ilhan Omar, he pushed off Adam Schiff, he got rid of, Swalwell, all deep security risks. But there's 100 more people. I'm writing a new book, House Un-Americans. I'm going to profile 100 members of Congress with their Marxist and Islamist ties. Every committee in the last Congress was headed by a Marxist. Benny Thompson, head of Homeland Security, running the January the 6th witch hunt, the chairman. Benny Thompson used to support the Republic of New Africa, a Black Panther group that killed several policemen. He was involved with the Communist Party USA, the Communist Workers' Party, and Democratic Socialists of America. He went to Cuba in 2000 and did a deal with Fidel Castro to give scholarships to 150 young Americans, mostly the sons and daughters of Communist Party members, to do 7-year scholarships, medical scholarships in Cuba. Those young people are now in communities all over your country, stirring up revolution in the minority communities. And that man was chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. He should be investigated by not chairman of it. As I say, there's 100 members of the House and 40 members of the US Senate who couldn't pass a background check to drive a school bus in this county. Now here's an imaginary scenario, right? Don't get excited about this. This is just hypothetical. Imagine one day the FBI wakes up. They say, we've got to do something. We are completely infiltrated in our government. These people are the reason we've got a nuclear deal with Iran looming that will cause war in the Middle East. These people are the reason our southern borders are wide open. These people are the reason we're no longer energy independent. These people are indoctrinating our kids in schools. They're turning our kids into perverts. They are destroying this country. We better darn well do something while we still have a country left. Let's go to our bosses in the Judiciary Committee. Let's talk to Mrs. Chu and Mr. Nadler. Mrs. Chu, Mr. Nadler, we need to investigate at least 100 of your Democratic colleagues for working for China, Cuba, the local communists and Islamist groups. Do you mind? And by the way, Mrs. Chu, by the way, Mr. Nadler, you're both on the list. Is that all right? What do you think would happen to their budget if they tried that one, folks? So this is the problem. There's no background checks on any congressman or senator or White House position. There is no media scrutiny on the left. You know, if a Republican gets a parking ticket, you'll hear all about it. Democrat can do almost anything, it'll be covered up. And there's no background checks, and the FBI doesn't dare to go after them, even if they were properly led. That is the reason why America's military's been gutted. It is why America's education is a mess, while China is buying everything they can and working to destroy this country. You know, Trump's intelligence advisor Ratcliffe said 2 years ago, the Chinese control so many American politicians, they can now determine which legislation passes your Congress and which doesn't. That should concern every American, no matter what political stripe you are. Now, I want to give you an example from the higher level cabinet. If you want to read Joe Biden's communist background, and he has a communist background, folks. He is not the blue-collar Republican we were told he was. You want to read it? It's in there. But I want to talk about one of his cabinet officers. This is particularly egregious. What was the first thing that Joe Biden did when he took office? Can anyone remember? Shut down the pipeline, right? Yeah. 11,000 Americans out of work overnight. Because Native Americans had been protesting because the pipeline was going right through Native territory, right? That was the reason we were told. And Joe Biden, you know, he wanted to do the right thing, so he shut down the pipeline. Well, all those protests were organised by a group called the Native Organizers Alliance. And the head of that organisation was a woman called Judith LeBlanc. Now, she's a Native American from Oklahoma. She did all of the organising, she trained the people, she was the power behind the throne there. She also serves on the Central Committee of the Communist Party USA, which is loyal to China and to Putin's Russia. Right now, in real time now. So, after that, she went out and did major voter registration drives in all of the Native American reservations in Montana, Arizona, Minnesota, New Mexico, all states that they thought could be a little bit iffy. And as a reward for that work, she got the vote out for Biden-Harris on those reservations. As a reward for that work, she was allowed to nominate her very close friend, a second-term congresswoman from New Mexico called Deb Haaland, who no one had ever heard of, as Secretary of the Interior for the United States. Now, they mounted a campaign, because nobody had ever heard of Deb Haaland. You probably still haven't heard of Deb Haaland. But she's Secretary of the Interior. And so they mounted a campaign, Deb for Interior. They had buses, they had buttons, it was a political campaign. They had celebrity endorsements, Alyssa Milano, Cher, Gloria Steinem, Sarah Silverman, Mark Ruffalo, Hanoi Jane Fonda, order Deb for Interior, Deb for Interior. And Joe Biden nominates her, and she got signed off with 4 Senate Republican votes. That's obviously Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, you know the ones. That woman is a Marxist. She used to hold signs up for the Party of Socialism and Liberation in New Mexico. That's a party that supports North Korea and Cuba and Iran. Now she's Secretary of the Interior. She has basically oversight of 20% of this country. All of the public lands, the border areas, all of the energy extraction on public lands. And she is shutting down every single energy lease she possibly can. When you need energy more than you've ever needed it, she is shutting it down. And she was put in place by a woman working for Putin and Xi Jinping. Now, what do you think the Chinese and the Russians want to happen to America? Do you think they really want us to be free and independent and strong so that we can challenge what they want to do? Or do you think they want us to be weak and divided and energy dependent and everybody tearing themselves apart? So she has put this woman in control of 20% of the land mass in this country. Every major cabinet secretary in Biden's administration is a Marxist or a Chinese acolyte. Every single one. From little Pete Buttigieg, who's wrecking our transportation system, to Marty Walsh, who worked with the Chinese in Massachusetts, to Miguel Cadrona, who is a complete Marxist who's now in control of the education system. We are in a revolution, folks. This is not just Republican, Democrat anymore. This is the Constitution versus communism. This is where we're at. It ain't going to get better unless we make it better, unless we stand up. You know, we just saw the Chinese inflict a biological weapon on this country that did massive damage to our economy, perfectly timed for Trump's election year. We just saw Black Lives Matter, which is a Chinese operation run out of the Chinese consulate in San Francisco, burn down our cities. We saw the Chinese communists then manage the lockdowns. Have you understood that all the states with the worst lockdowns are the ones with the strongest unions and the most Chinese influence? California, New Jersey, North Carolina, Massachusetts, New York, Illinois, Oregon, Hawaii. The Chinese use their subservient politicians and their unions, which they all control, all the unions in this country are now communist controlled, to push the lockdowns as hard and as long as they possibly could to inflict maximum damage on the United States economy. And then we could talk for hours about the election fraud. The Chinese had forget about the electronic stuff, that happened. The Chinese had all these voter registration networks controlled by pro-Chinese communists operating in several states. In Detroit, in Michigan, they had Detroit Action. Pennsylvania, they had Pennsylvania Stands Up. Georgia, they had the New Georgia Project. Arizona, they had Lucha. Wisconsin, they had black leaders organizing communities. Are these states in any way familiar to you? And every one of the key states that decided both of the last elections, the Chinese had mass voter registration organizations operating on the ground. In Arizona, they claim that they did 8 million phone calls and knocked on 1 million doors. They openly claim credit for flipping Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin. They claim credit for winning the election for Biden-Harris, folks. These are communist Chinese-backed voter registration organizations operating completely under the radar, under our very noses. So we're at war with China, folks. We're at war right now. So what do, people? Do we all slit our wrists? You know, I hate it when people walk out about now because they think, what are they going to do? You know, look, why do I say this? Why do I say these horrible things? Because the only way we're going to get through this is if we face reality. We've got to actually see where we are. Because I don't believe we're going to get through this without a little divine providence. A lot of divine providence. And we are always commanded to be discerning and be truthful and to fight evil. The only way we're going to get through this is to actually confront the reality of our situation. Stop living in la-la land. It's all going to be better in 2 years if we just vote for the right people. And actually stand up and tell the truth and do the hard things necessary to get this country back on track. Telling the truth takes courage. Where do you get your courage from? You get your courage from your faith. Telling the truth and standing up for what is right is proof to God that you believe in something bigger. That you actually believe this is a just universe and that evil must be defeated and good must be promoted at all costs. And maybe if enough people do that, maybe God will decide this country is worth saving after all.
Amen.
So what do we do on a practical basis? Well, I've got a few suggestions, but I think the first thing is just face reality. We are in a revolution. We're not, President Trump's not secretly in control. He's not going to come back on a white horse and put thousands of people in jail. We are hanging on by a thread. And we got something on our side though. We got 80 million Trump voters out there, 30 million more who wish they had been, and God. That's our army. But we have to stand up in truth and faith and courage. You look at your American Revolution. You never should have won that. You crazy. You had a bunch of farmers and blacksmiths and fishermen with squirrel rifles up against the world's greatest military machine. How insane was that? And all they had was this wacko idea that had never ever been tried before, that man's rights come from God, not from government.
That's right.
And that concept inspired the people to make the sacrifices necessary and to do the hard things and to fight against overwhelming odds and to eventually prevail. You think they could have done that with some vague... You think a bunch of atheists could have done what they did?
No.
No way.
You think a bunch of liberal wimps could have done what they did?
No.
They were people, most of your revolutionary military leaders were pastors. The famous black-robed regiments, the Bible in one hand and the long rifle in the other. They knew that Christianity is a masculine, tough religion that believes in smiting evil, that believes in freedom and prosperity for people. And they were willing to make the sacrifices required because they believed they were doing God's will. Now this is another little point. A lot of people say to me, oh, give us some hope, Loudon. Come on, give us some hope here. Well, Dennis Prager said a great thing at a meeting I went to in Naples, Florida not long ago. Naples, Florida voted 92% for Trump, people. That's a conservative area. And he got up and said the same thing, he said, people always ask me for hope. And he said, I say this is not really the right question. Everybody should get up every morning and say, what is God's will? What should I be doing that will please God? Because if we do that, then we can start to talk about hope. God's not going to come down and save a bunch of simpering wimps who are complaining and moaning about how terrible it is. He is going to save people. He's going to help people who stand against evil, who stand up for what is right no matter what it costs them. Because that is proof to him that they believe in something bigger, that they believe in him. And if they believe in him, why should you not help those people? But if they are just faithless, look at the Old Testament. There's a group at the end of, no, not the Old Testament, in the book of Revelations, I mean. There's a group of people, a list of people who get cast into the pit of hell at the end of time. And there's a list of sinners, right? And there's murderers and idolaters and whatever. Do you know what the very first group of people that go to hell is? The cowards.
That's right.
The cowards. Why are the cowards the worst? Worse than murderers or idolaters? Because cowards have no faith. Because cowards believe in nothing. They have nothing to inspire them or get them to make the brave decisions. You look at David standing there with a bit of string and a bit of leather and a rock against Goliath, this towering giant. How much faith would you have to have the courage to do what he did? You look at the famous story of Gideon's army. 300 against the horde, and God kept whittling down the numbers. No, you don't need that many, you don't need that many. 300, that's what you got. Because that's the message. It is not the numbers, it is a few faithful, courageous people that will make all of the difference. Now, if you don't believe that, you look at the pro-life movement and what they have done in this country just by perseverance and courage. They did something that I didn't believe could be done. And they took all the slings and arrows you could possibly imagine. They had to fight for years, and look what they have done. You think maybe that pleased God a little bit?
Amen.
So, that's the message. Your founding fathers, they were a small number, but they had the right beliefs and they had the courage of their convictions, and they prevailed with a bit of help from the French and a bit of help from God. A lot of help from God. So where are we at? We're in a time that things are dark. We've been assailed on every side. We've been attacked by the globalists and the Chinese and traitors in our own movement. Attacked by the rotten education system, all of it. I understand all of that. And if I thought this was just a battle of material forces versus material forces, I'd be back in New Zealand building bunkers and stocking up on baked beans, right? But I know it's more than that. This is a spiritual battle that we are in. And now is the time to choose which side you're on. There's no longer any room to sit on the fence. And this is what I'll say. The greatest victories come from the darkest times.
Right.
Because that's when the good people finally get off the darn fence and do what they should have been doing all along. And we're at that time now. You know, that COVID did us a little favour in a way. You know, millions of people sat at home for a few years, reading their kids' school textbooks in utter horror, watching their cities burn with no consequences, watching a Chinese epidemic wreck their economy, close their churches, close their schools, and then watching elections stolen in the world's greatest country before their eyes with no consequences. And sometimes you almost have to lose something before you really appreciate it. And right now I tour all over this country, and I'm seeing millions of people fired up. They finally realised we could lose this nation. And they're out there with Moms for Liberty and all these new groups springing up everywhere. Everywhere I go. And they're taking over state legislatures. They're taking over school boards. They are making a difference everywhere you go. It's bigger than the Tea Party movement. It's younger than the Tea Party movement. But you don't hear about it because the media doesn't want to give it any oxygen. But it's out there, folks. And we saw that manifest when 20 brave congressmen faced down Kevin McCarthy and got a whole bunch of concessions that are going to make a big difference going forward. They took a big risk, folks. They could not have done that before Trump. There are changes that are happening in this country that are very inspiring. It's still new, it's still small, but we are seeing changes like we have never seen before. And we're seeing people turn to God like they've never seen before. Do you know the most popular thing for young 20-somethings to do right now in New York? The hip, cool thing to do? You go to a Latin Mass, a Catholic Latin Mass. Because people are looking for a spiritual basis. They're looking for direction. They're sick of the negativity. They're sick of the global warming. We're all going to die in 12 years. They're sick of the anti-Americanism, the feeling of hopelessness. They want a spiritual anchor. And they are looking for it, folks. And they're out there doing it now. There's a lot of hopeful things happening in this country. It's dark, but it's turning. And we've got to accelerate that turning. And this group, Liberty and Prosperity, has been at the backbone of that for a very long time, before anyone else around this area. And I really commend all of you, the people who have been here right at the beginning and the people that are carrying on through, for the changes you make and just flying the flag of freedom. It inspires people all around. So what do we do locally? Well, I commend you ladies for standing for school board. I really do. And I want you to think about this. It is not enough just to get elected to your school board. That's great. That's the first step. And some people say, we're going to take over our school board and we're going to run it so much better. We're going to cut the waste out. And that's great. But the real objective should be to get enough people in there so you can throw out the whole darn curriculum. Yes. Whole curriculum. And you can put a Hillsdale College curriculum in, or a homeschool curriculum, and you can teach your kids real history and real math and real physics and real geography. You can do them the greatest favour you'll ever do them. And I applaud people who homeschool, that's great. But 95% of parents can't do that. We've still got the public schools, and we had great public schools for 200 years in this country. I'll guarantee you, the poorest little black kid in Alabama in 1954, in the poorest school district in the state, would have got a better education in math and reading and writing and arithmetic than the richest white kid in the richest school district in New Jersey gets today. That's right. Anybody want to argue with that? So we have to put it on the agenda. We have to take over the school boards. We have to stare down the teachers' unions, the biggest child molesters in the country. And we got to just stick it to them and persevere and tell the truth and take them back and change the curriculums. And you get the real estate companies to finance your campaigns, because they're going to make so much money when people move into their district to get their kids in your school. Just a couple of more minutes. You've got to get rid of the Department of Education. That's got to be top of the agenda. Got to be top. I know I've got to wind up on it. Voter fraud. Vote fraud. There are a lot of counties in this country are throwing out voter machines. A lot of them are doing that. You've got to put that on your agenda in your local counties. Now you'll see Republicans will say, oh, there's no vote fraud, the machines are fine. That's not the point. Even if that was true, and it's not. You're going to go and knock on a door one day and you're going to meet some veteran and you're going to say, we had a great Conservative candidate here, we want you to support him. You say, oh, that's good. You're Conservative? Absolutely. You say, well, do you come out to vote for him? You say, well, do you still have voting machines in this county? And you say, oh, yeah, we do. He says, no, I'm going fishing that day. Because 10% of your base does not trust voting machines ever at all under any circumstances. We're going to lose 5 to 10% of our base in every election going forward if we don't get rid of voting machines, paper ballots, the whole lot. That should be a top priority of every county. Several counties have done this. There's no reason why we can't put that on our agenda. It's got to be done or we're going to lose this country. Why did we have a red wave in Florida? Thank you. Why did we have a red wave in Florida? Because Ron DeSantis hasn't done enough, but he's done more to clamp down on vote fraud than any other governor in the country. So we actually got more of a real election in our state. People actually have confidence because he's put vote fraudsters, he's prosecuted vote fraudsters. He has an organisation specifically devoted to going after vote fraud. It's illegal in Florida to do vote fraud. Did you know that? So I could go on for a long time, and I want to take some questions, but I want to say this. We're at a special moment in history. We're at a time where if we get through this, with all the technology that's coming on stream and the new conservatism of the youth, we are looking at a golden age in America, across the world. We are looking at the toppling of dictators all around the world. We are at a cusp. But if we don't seize this moment, our children will live in slavery beyond anything we can possibly imagine. We're at one of those critical times in history. This is the time where what we do in our local districts is going to inspire others around the country and please God. That's where we are. We're at a time where courage is at a premium, where we got to stand on what we believe, and to hell with the consequences. Doesn't matter if we don't get invited to the family reunion. It doesn't matter if we get kicked out of the country club. What is that going to matter in 100 years' time, folks? What's going to matter is that your kids and your grandchildren live free. Does anything matter more than that, folks? So this is what I say. It's up in the air at the moment, but I do know this. If we do nothing with this great God-given opportunity, our kids will live in slavery and they will not thank us for it. But if we fight with everything in our being for our God, our country, our family, two things may happen. One, we may give it everything we have and we sweat blood for what we believe in, and maybe we lose. Maybe. But at least all of us will earn the right to look our children in the eye and say, I did everything I possibly could for you. And what is that worth to you, folks?
Everything.
Priceless.
Priceless. And if we win, and we absolutely can win this, folks, that 2016 election convinced me that God is not finished with this country yet, folks. We win this, we carry on forward, we will spark an economic boom like we have never seen. We will spark a liberty revolution, not in this country, but across the world. We will lay the seeds for a much needed spiritual revival. And all of us will earn the right to pass on to our children and grandchildren a country not just that you inherited and I came to, but one that is even greater. One that may lead the world into liberty and prosperity for hundreds of years into the future. Is just the chance of that worth our little sacrifice, folks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I want to say to all of you, thank you so much for what you do for America and for my country and for liberty. God bless America. God bless the great state of New Jersey. God